So this episode is going to be on self-worth. The reason I use the word self-worth instead of self-esteem is I just don't like that fucking word. I don't know how to explain it. I just don't like the word. I'm sure it's fine as a word. I just don't like it. But anyway, welcome to this episode. Um, First, let's just start with tips. Number one way to improve your self-worth, look in a mirror and just say, I'm the best 10 times. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of just doing affirmations. So here's how you heal. I'm going to use the word self-esteem just to piss off Vinny. Here's how you work through your self-esteem. Get 5 little notepads and put them on your little mirror. And then in your little bathroom, just like...
Hey, you're an all-star, right? You're an all-star on a
You're an
Post-it.
all-star, and listen to the song they play at the beginning of Shrek.
Hey now,
You're an
you're
all-star.
an all-star.
Here's your game face. Put your game face on. All right, that's the episode.
No, the
That was a
reason
good
the reason we are talking like this is because we cannot stand that kind of therapist who talks about affirmations like they're the second coming.
Oh,
when
really?
in reality, let's talk about the truth about self-worth. Self-worth is very little affected by the words you say to yourself. You want to know why? Because the words you say to yourself are the reason your self-worth is low to begin with. You know, like you can't solve a problem of an inner critic with more words. You solve it through changing your behaviors. You solve your self-worth issues by starting to behave like someone who has value for themselves. And then the next question would be, yeah, that sounds easier said than done. Yeah, no shit, it's easier said than done. It's gonna be really hard. It's gonna make you anxious. It's gonna make you anxious to go to your boss and say, hey, I don't wanna continue to work overtime without you paying me to do so. But the truth is, no matter what the outcome of that interaction, your self-worth will improve simply by the act of advocating for yourself. It actually doesn't matter what happens after that. And so just to get this started, the way I like to look at self-worth is pretend your self-worth is this little room in your brain that has no windows and has a locked door. And the only way your self-worth kind of keeps a tally about how you view yourself is at the end of every day, under the door is slipped a list of all of your behaviors. And it takes a look at all of your behaviors and tallies the ones where you view yourself highly and value yourself highly, and it tallies the ones where you view yourself lowly. And it basically takes an assessment of what kind of person does this list look like. Let's see. They take up very little space when they're in public transportation. They don't speak up for themselves when they're being mistreated. And when their order is wrong at a restaurant, they don't say anything. This person has low self-worth. Let's give them low self-worth. That's as simple as it is.
Yeah. Dang. Yes. I mean, when it comes to working on that, it's so good with that receipt analogy, because with low self-worth, it's almost like this hazing process where you've been hazed over and over and over again by yourself to accept a certain amount from reality. And there's so like if you're trying to heal, if you're trying to increase your self-worth, you have to start putting yourself first and allowing yourself to even inconvenience others at times for your own benefit, not in an unhealthy way, because we all have a very reptilian part of our brain that learns based on experience. It's the same part of our brain that started off as not knowing how to tie your shoes, but once you built that habit, now you don't have to think about it. Now you don't have to think about how to drive. Well, now you also don't have to think about how to have low self-worth, because over and over and over again, you've acted in ways where you haven't inconvenienced others, which then sends a message to your psyche that my wants and needs are not as important as the next person. So to undo that, you really can benefit by practicing behavioral activities of putting yourself first, or self-care activities like that. And so I just love that analogy, the receipt, like being a person, right? Because that's so relatable. It's like, all right, Vinny's someone that brushes his teeth and, whatever. Like, that's good.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, it's because I think your self-worth only registers behavior. I think that's probably slightly oversimplified, but generally true. And like you were saying, like the conditioning, right? Like, I'm not saying that like affirmations are bad or whatever. I mean, I kind of am, but I just think they're over. I mean, think about it, right? Like, you always have to be suspicious about whatever the current trend in mental health is, because trends trends are trendy because they are easy, you know? Like the if all I need to do is take a pill and all of a sudden my self-worth increases, that's going to be a much more favorable choice than making yourself miserable for a few months as you rework
Yeah.
yourself. You
Yeah.
know? So if affirmations just feel too easy to be true, and
Mhm.
oftentimes they are, but like I think you're so also, right, like so your conditioning of your attention. If you're someone with low self-worth, I imagine your attention has been conditioned into focusing on the things you're doing wrong and minimizing the things you're doing right. Like, for instance, let's say you did the laundry today when you didn't really want to. Someone with low self-worth is going to go, well, of course, big deal. Like, who cares? But someone with high self-worth might make a point of going, I'm proud of myself, or just like, pushing myself a little bit and doing something I didn't want to do, right? And that has an impact, not because you're saying it, but because you're witnessing it. You're witnessing your efforts. You're witnessing behavior. Someone who is an accomplished athlete but never takes the time to acknowledge the accomplishment is not going to feel very good about themselves. They're going to constantly be criticizing themselves. And I imagine someone with low self-worth probably is often highlighting negative things without really recognizing the good things they're doing in their life. Someone with low self-worth might be a CEO of a company. It doesn't matter. It's
Mm.
that their attention is fixated on what they're doing wrong and not what they're doing right.
Yeah, and I think there's two ways to really work through that. And like you said, and this is one of the reasons why affirmations can be less effective. And it's because it's figuring out what's the underlying dynamic here. And then after that, working towards this growth when it comes to your self worth. Because when I think about working with self worth and affirmations, it's like, let's say you had a bully that was just constantly calling you ugly. And then instead of, telling the bully, I don't care or whatever, you start shouting affirmations at it, like, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, no, I'm not. Like that might work, maybe, but every time you see that bully, there's still going to be the insecurity of them calling you a bad name or something like that. And that's the power of affirmations. But the real power comes from they call you something and you think it's so ridiculous that you don't even have to address it. Or you go up to them and say, okay, yeah, what if that was true? Yeah, wow, that's a really interesting joke you made there. And they don't get a reaction out of you. Now they're kind of like, what how can I play this game anymore? And so I think part of self-worth and working through it is how can you become so truly yourself and so truly aware of your self-worth that the bullies in your life are barely threatening at all, so much so that you even pity them.
I think that's a good point. It's like if the bully is a part of you, how do you identify a bigger part of you that's witnessing all of this? Like if the theater drama is playing out in front of you, who is witnessing that? And can that person also, can that be the source of where your new sense of comfort comes from? Like, are you gonna fight with the play, or are you going to remind yourself that it's a play? And I think first, in order to understand that it is a play, you kind of have to understand where low self-worth comes from. No one's born with low self-worth. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
not something you are born into this world with. And I think oftentimes the second you start to realize that is the second you start to realize you could do something about it. Wait a minute, I wasn't born with this feeling about myself. Where does it come from then? And the truth is, and I think this is what I believe at least, that low self-worth comes from feeling like relationships are inherently conditional.
Mm.
If you are not, if your relationship with the people that are important to you when you're a child feels conditionally supportive, when the unique parts of me come out are not accepted by the people I rely on most, what does that say about you as a person in general? It says that you are either lacking something or the way you are is inherently not acceptable in some way. And so what do? You hide certain parts of yourself because you're afraid of being rejected. And now all of a sudden, your sense of self develops this shame about who you are, and you hide the fact that you are different in any way. And so your uniqueness becomes suppressed and your sense of self-worth becomes impacted in the process. That's at least what I feel.
Yeah, I mean that really ties well with shadow work, right? Like a lot of times people can be completely in shame because they think all of their self is hyperlink to episode 1. Like guilt is like when you're wiping away a stain on your shirt, but shame is when you actually are the stain, right? Like I think some people really live that reality where they feel like they can't quite exist in relationships at all. And some people might feel a sense of self-worth in some areas, but not in others. Like I know a lot of people with different attachment styles, like avoidant attachment. You probably don't have a whole lot of experience of people being there for you when you're perceiving yourself as weak, right? Or some people, it's whenever you're angry and the difficult person, like you don't have a whole lot of people that have been there for you in those moments. And so now as an adult, you don't allow yourself to be the difficult person. And so building self-worth can come from how can you obtain real experiences where you actually felt those things that lead to the shadow side and simply exist in relationships with good people, because that's going to remind you that you are you, and that's enough. And you can still operate in other ways, like to contribute to relationships too, but you have to start there as the foundation.
I totally agree. And that's why I feel like the path to self-worth is self-acceptance. Like there is no other direct line. And I think oftentimes the ways in which people fight that reality, how do I change a little bit about myself? You know what I mean? It's always someone I think a lot of times, especially people with like ADHD, I've noticed this, but I think having low self-worth is often not the most resonating label for people who are interested in this topic. It's a better way to describe it is their self-worth tends to fluctuate a lot. The way they view themselves is very kind of context dependent. In this moment, I feel great, but in that moment, I feel awful about myself. And the truth is, low self-worth is fluctuating self-worth. Like the fact that your self-worth is so kind of impacted moment to moment, there's a part of your brain that knows that is true and therefore avoids certain circumstances that might evoke that. And so without knowing it, if you have fluctuating self-worth, you're going to select yourself out of certain interactions that trigger it. So maybe, for instance, I'm not going to approach someone who I think is out of my league because that's going to trigger it. But I feel really confident dating people who are, on this level.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's about figuring out who you're avoiding to defend something. Like, what are you defending? Like, I like this. Like imagine you are a mama bear and you have these baby cubs that you're protecting. Like, who are those baby cubs? Because that's probably where you feel that feeling of insecurity that you in real security looks like you don't have to protect those baby cubs. They're free and they're just as strong as you. I don't know. I'm taking an analogy.
No, that's I really like that. No, because what you're saying is like, like let the guilt be your guide. Let your defensive be the I use this analogy with clients. Like, like a truffle pig. Let's just stop
pig?
right there. Yeah.
What is a truffle pig?
You don't know what truffle pig is?
Is it a yellow one or something?
So truffles, which are quite expensive, right? Are found in the ground, and you can't readily see them. So, but you can smell them if you have a sense of smell that is kind of conditioned to find them. So pigs are generally conditioned into finding truffles. Oh. So you bring pigs to areas where you think truffles are, and they sniff them out, and they find them in the ground, right? But the real it's so funny. I have no idea why I was even talking about pigs.
You talking about an analogy for clients.
But so like, I mean, I think I joke with clients where I'm like, I got to stay in business, so I got to keep you kind of off getting healthy. That's my goal. No, that's a joke. But the reality is what I really like is for clients to become their own therapists so that at some point they don't need me anymore. I don't want them to need me. I want them to feel, I mean, the best sense of self-worth is going like, in this moment, like, yeah, I could use Vinny, but I actually feel like I have the tools to handle this. So how do you get there? You have to become good at sniffing out. There you go. You have to become good at sniffing out, like, where's the work? Where does the work need to be done? Like, you could have all of the tools of knowing how to handle adversity, but if you don't know where that adversity is, it's going to be hard to do the necessary growth that you need. So for instance, when we're talking about self-worth, oftentimes the direction of where you need to do that work is, where do I get defensive? Where do I get kind of insecure in social situations? Because at its core, you have to understand, no one has self-worth issues in a vacuum. If you lived on a planet by yourself, you would have no self-worth issues, because you need other people bouncing off of you kind of what they consider acceptable and what they consider unacceptable, for you to develop this sense of inadequacy. And so, because self-worth and shame are inherently social phenomenon, you need to understand, like, okay, in an environment where other people are witnessing me, where do I feel most insecure? Well, I feel most insecure about my hair, and that's why I wear hats all the time. Well, then there's your work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, like, and as you were saying that, I thought of a question would you feel guilty if you masturbated on a planet alone?
That's such a great question. Oh my God.
I was trying to keep a straight face while asking it.
I'm gonna take it seriously.
No. Are you? Okay.
Would you feel guilty if you why are you feeling guilty about masturbating in general?
I mean,
Said
if
from
you've
the
never
secular
seen,
side of this argument.
yeah, because then there's nobody to. Oh, that's awful. Let's get out of this.
It's like if a tree falls. Wait. If you if you masturbate on a planet alone, do you make a sound?
Like vocally?
This is why when I upload our videos to YouTube, I check the over 18 button.
It's usually you that makes it
I know.
happen.
You know, when I upload our videos, in my head, I'm like, if I was just more clean, I could click like the kids button.
You could. You would have a bigger audience.
Yeah, but this is where I resist the urge of ever accommodating the algorithm. I will actively.
You're gonna like drop every F-bomb. I'm the opposite, where I'm like, I don't think about it much. I just don't curse usually, but growing up in the South, like it's just habitual at that point, right? And then also you have like your family and friends watching your videos.
Who watches in your family?
Actually, not a lot, but when I show them videos, like, wow, Jay, that's awesome.
They didn't watch it. Whenever a client
they love my stuff, but it's just
I'm
like,
sure.
they're like,
It's
he's
long.
great, he's awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Whenever a client says to me like, when you said this thing, I'm like, wow, that was like an hour and a half in. Like, I'm shocked that you.
Yeah, me too.
That.
It's like feels so flattering, right? You're like, oh my gosh, you invested, and I took notes. I'm like, what? No, but there was something you said about after the planet thing. You're on a world by yourself.
Wait, I want to actually answer the question though.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, okay. Question one: why are you feeling shame about masturbating? Because you're masturbating shaming right there, and that's where your Christian background trips you up.
Oh,
but
wow.
let's put that aside.
Dang, you're going deep. You're going knee deep.
Let's put that aside.
You make me squirm.
Well, here's the thing.
Or like, is that like also red pill community? Like, don't masturbate. That's going to take away your
God,
drive.
no fap, blah blah blah. I mean,
No fap November.
I mean, I feel like people just try so hard to like oversimplify problems. It's like it's like with anything. It's not the fact that you're masturbating. It's your relationship to your sexuality is probably fraught. You know, like analyze that. Like don't stop looking at like the one way in which your issue manifests in the world and treat that like it's the major problem, and maybe like peel a couple layers back. Understand the nuance of the problem.
It's nuance. It's not one way. Because I mean, like, even some people will have this. So I even think about this with like ADHD, but you have these 3 boxes of awareness. You have your working memory at the top, where it's like, 7 plus or minus 2 chunks.
Nice.
And then on the left side, you have your abyss, where you like toss stuff that you're just not thinking about, or that could look like a to-do list. And then on the right side, you have the stuff you're actively working on. And so with ADHD, that top box, the working memory one, can be kind of like cut in half, because that's how it is with ADHD. And you can either have the tendency or the strategy to use this information flowing in really quickly to just put it into the abyss. So you see a lot of procrastination. and you can just be the king of like self-operating systems, or you can be someone that is obsessed with knocking out like really quickly. And so with ADHD, that's part of the reason why you have to really rely on your intuition, because information is flowing out of that working memory so quickly, and it's anxiety provoking when that box get fills up. But I guess I was tying that to masturbation, because like if you are like some people will masturbate for the purpose of pulling, like I'm actively working on something, and because there's something that I feel insecure about working on. I don't know if I can do it.
It's a drug.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna
Yeah.
pull it into this box of flip through phone or masturbate, or and I think that's just an interesting way too, where for somebody else it could be completely different, of like, I'm lusting after a woman, or anything.
Well, I think shame and addiction kind of go hand in hand, and I think oftentimes like honestly, is there a difference between low self-worth and shame? Like, is not shame the emotion most associated with low self-worth?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the difference?
I actually don't know. Yeah.
Right? I don't think there is a difference. I think at its core, when you're feeling shameful, you're feeling like there's something wrong with you in some way that would be rejected by society if you showed it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And believing that creates this sense that you're of lower value than the person next to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's always comparative. You can't feel of low self-worth without someone to compare yourself to. But the problem with comparing yourself to other people is that you're comparing yourself to a hypothetical person. Like, you don't know what's going on in their internal experience, but that doesn't matter, because that's the problem with low self-worth is most of the people with low self-worth are quite self-absorbed at the same time. They're constantly comparing themselves to other people, comparing their attributes and their capacities to do things. And I think that's why a lot of times I think, if not all, a majority of people with ADHD have some little issue with self-worth somewhere baked in there, because you're born with this impairment that is so quiet and so hard to identify that you automatically just assume like there's just something going on about me that is keeping me from meeting other people where they're at. And so of course that's going to develop a lot of shame and self-worth issues. But so like I said before, what's the solution to a lot of shame and self-worth issues? It's self-acceptance. If low self-worth is the problem, self-acceptance is the solution. The issue with self-acceptance, though, in these circumstances, it's easy to say accept yourself, right? But the real question is what inhibits people from getting to a place of self-acceptance? It's acknowledging that with self-acceptance comes acknowledgement of limitations in your life. If you truly accept that you have a limitation in one facet of your life, like for instance, if you have ADHD, and you just know you're going to be more forgetful and have a more difficult time with organizing things, right? Like, there are just some things you won't be great at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very hard for people to grieve the loss of that possibility.
Yes, definitely. With ADHD, it's so connected with shame, because you have a lot of experiences where you expect that you're doing everything great. In fact, you might actually be, based on other people's typical expectations, like killing it at life or whatever. And then all of a sudden you wear the wrong pair of jeans to a wedding, or you're not supposed to wear jeans to a wedding. See, look at that.
Did you wear the wrong pair of jeans to a wedding?
I wore jeans to a wedding one time, not to my wedding, but somebody else's.
Were you married at this time?
Yeah.
Oh, she let you wear jeans to a wedding.
She wasn't in the house when I got dressed.
There you go. We've solved that mystery.
You can't tell people that my stories are always about me.
There's no world.
Secretly.
There's no world where Tilby lets you leave the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I wanted, and this is a good example, because part of the reason that I was also like running a little late was because I was like, I want to be a great husband. I want to get flowers for her and bring it there. And then I was like, wait a minute. When I got there, where is she going to put this flower?
Why are you getting flowers for your wife
at somebody else's wedding?
At someone else's wedding.
Right.
Wait, so why?
I don't know. It just
when,
was a thought
when you
that
gave them to her, she was like, thank you.
She's like, thank you. And then she just kind of like put them next to her because she didn't know where to put them.
There's this scene in The Office where Dwight brings, or where Andy brings flowers to Angela, and it's in the episode The Dinner Party. Have you seen that episode? You've never seen it. Oh, you are watching The Office.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he gives her a flower, and she's like, "What am I supposed to do with this?"
That was Toby. That is me. Like I could be on fire, right? I'm like, oh, this did something for Toby. She's like, this was perfect. And then the next day
It's
I'm
very
like,
sweet though.
yeah. And it's just inherently sort of this good gesture you might be making with ADHD. And then everybody looks at you like you're a weirdo. Like, why did you do this? And it's not in a judgmental way, like, especially like even just talking about like it was fun, right? Like it's funny, like you're doing something that's very like neurodivergent, not very neurotypical. But then sometimes it turns into, wait a minute, you did this thing that was just very offensive. And then and the person that's neurotypical assumes that you were aware that you just could have been offensive in your behavior. But as someone with ADHD, you don't realize that, and then you get this huge smack on the wrist, and then you walk away with, there's something I tried so hard and got so
what's
far.
Wrong with me? What's wrong with
What's
me?
wrong with me? Yeah.
Nothing.
Yep.
Nothing. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's why self-acceptance is so hard, because there's a part of you that really wants to beat yourself up in that moment.
Yep.
Like if only I could beat myself up. I mean, this is what really keeps people stuck from improving their self-worth is like, there's such a gravitational pull towards beating yourself up when something doesn't go right, because you believe the myth that if I could beat myself up just enough, I won't let this happen again and I will improve my life. The truth is, the cause of the low self-worth is not the mistake that you made, but the conditioning of self-criticism.
Yeah, and society too, right? The problem isn't completely and solely that you made this huge error and made this horrible moral choice, but it's also just a lack of education from your environment, that somebody is so offended to the point they're not curious as to why you might have done something this way. And also, yeah, like you said, like I can totally relate to that, like this beating up of the self, and it's funny sometimes too, like not funny in a funny way, but like in a non-funny way,
In a tragic way.
in a tragic way. But like with ADHD, you can experience like this failing of the self almost like repeatedly. Like you forget something, and then this happens, and then this big thing happens, and then it just takes one more straw that breaks the camel back. Like you're like, where's my phone? And then you just start like, then the emotion pops up. You're like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? And then that's where the beating up can start. And something almost feels good about that beating up of the self. But in reality, that's like a moment where you can just really lean more into that acceptance, which is hard and something I've been having to work on myself.
And the phone thing, I would argue that when the phone thing happens, like that inflection point of like now all the shit's gonna come, I think that moment is when the script in your head, the coding program, you've hit run. And now you're just completely in autopilot doing this conditioned response that you've done many times before of like, here's why I'm a piece of shit. Here's what I'm going to do about it. And this is how I'll down regulate back to the baseline. And it's such a cascade that's happening to you that you're not really, you almost need to put effort in to prevent it from going. Like it requires less energy at that point. It's kind of like you're at the top of a mountain, and now all you have to do is one little push left and it will just take you all the way down. The problem is that ride sucks. And because it's so familiar, it's so easy to go down it. And at the end of that ride, you return back to baseline. But the path of destruction that you cause on your own self-worth is not in the long run a worthwhile approach to dealing with this stuff.
Interesting. That really does walk through the thought process. But what's the alternative?
The alternative is recognizing, okay, honestly, the alternative is the same thing that it for any addiction, which is like, I feel this gravitational pull to deal with this discomfort in a very familiar way that I know will predictably lead me down to a baseline back to normal. But the destruction that this approach causes, I know because of past experiences, is so unpleasant and causes more pain than helps me that I can't do this anymore. It's kind of like, I always tell this, like, especially when I used to do DBT groups, like if you look at your distress on a scale of 0 to 100, right? Everyone has this number whether it's 60 or 70 or 48. Everyone has this number where when their distress, and if you have a difficult time regulating your emotions, when your distress passes this certain threshold, your brain goes, hey, you no longer have the tools to go this way. You can't go back down because you're past a point where going back down is even possible. So what we're going to do, I have a great idea. We're going to throw gasoline on this fire. We're going to let it go all the way to the top. And once it hits 100, you will become so dysregulated that you'll actually just reset, right? It's kind of like, oh, my computer is overheating. Let's open up a ton of tabs until it just shuts down. And at some point, it's going to shut down, cool off, and then we can reboot it and we can restart, right? And so the problem is it really messes with your hardware if you keep doing it that way. But some people don't have any alternative, and so whenever they pass a certain point of overwhelm, this like autopilot script happens where they're just like, fuck it, let's just go up and around. It's going to cause a bunch of destruction. I might lose a friend in the process. You know, I might pick up a new drug habit in the process, but I know at the end of it, I'm going to feel back to normal. And ultimately, what this problem is one of dysregulation. And the only way I know how to deal with this is going up and around. You know what I mean?
Interesting. I think so. Yeah. It's like choosing.
I've lost you.
You might have lost me, but you might not have. Like if I
like let me put it in a different way. Like imagine like, okay, that straw that broke the camel's back is I can't find my phone. And I've hit this point of like, I've hit the fuck it's part of my distress, right? So instead of doing some deep breathing or taking a step outside to just breathe some fresh air, I know that I'm just gonna, pick a fight or the next person in my general vicinity I'm gonna argue with, and it's gonna make me crazy, and I'm gonna get super upset, and we're gonna have a screaming match, and then at the end of that, instead of instead of kind of resolving it in a healthy way, we're just gonna slam doors. And I'm gonna retreat back to my apartment. I'm gonna have a whiskey and smoke a joint, and then the next day we'll make up, right?
Mhm.
And you know that kind of that's the move, and you willingly kind of submit to it because you feel like that's your only option.
I see. Yeah, like it's you feel completely upset in the moment, but you don't actually deal with what's actually happening underneath. You like
You put fuel on the fire.
you
Let's
blow it
get
up.
up to
Yeah.
100 so that we can at least just reboot and reset. Because I don't know how to go down the other way.
Yeah, and for me, it's like sharing more of your like emotions, right? Like sadness. Well, I guess all emotions, but and then talking that out and just be like, I feel, and just recollecting like what's happening, like with Tilby.
Mhm.
And in that moment, it's like this sad kind of thing, but it also sort of, and I guess maybe that's my version of overheating the system, right?
Well, you're a therapist, so I feel like you're probably pretty good at regulating your emotions.
But it also is sort of like a self-pity sort of thing too. Like I can try to redirect it sometimes, but it feels almost kind of good to do that because
pile
it's
on.
healthy.
You pile on. I'm such a piece of shit. I can do
Yeah.
nothing right.
Yeah, I'm like I just like look at me, this system that can't work as a human, right? Like that can feel kind of good.
That's your escalation.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you go from there's something wrong with this moment to there's something wrong with me. And then she probably says something like, no, there's not, and comforts you.
Yep.
And then you return back to baseline.
Yep.
So the alternative would be in those moments where you are looking for someone to validate your sense of wholeness. Can you identify that in that moment, I don't believe I can get there myself. There's a belief that you've convinced yourself of, which is I can't feel whole until someone shines a light on it for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like there's something that's making me want to let that out.
Yeah.
And then that implies there's a place to get to that I need to get to. Like I'm broken.
You've
kinda thing.
lost the sense of wholeness that's always been there.
Yeah, like there's this because then I wouldn't have experienced the sadness in the first place. Wow, that's good. Interesting. You give me some therapy, huh?
It always, especially when it's not your topic.
Yeah.
You're like just going with it.
Uh-huh.
But I think at its core, right? There's nothing wrong with your self-worth fluctuating, but it's more like what do you do when your self-worth is low? Do you pile on and does that inner critic get louder? And what, to what extent is that inner critic even you? I feel like a lot of times people with low self-worth, one of the questions I'll ask them is, like, when you are really critical of yourself, does it have your tone to it? Does it use your language, or does it come from somewhere else? And I think a lot of times people will go, actually, that inner critic doesn't sound like me. It sounds like so-and-so. And it's like, okay, so there was some point in your life where you've internalized a voice that's not yours and have forgotten that it's not yours. And when it's criticizing you, you think it's you, but if you can just de-identify from it and go, oh, that's not me. I would never talk to myself like that because I would never talk to someone else like that. All of a sudden a light bulb goes off and you're like, wait a minute, I'm actually a lot softer to other people. So maybe I'm just not soft to myself because that voice I've never turned inward. Maybe the voice that I think is inward is actually not me.
Wow. Dang. And I think that even adds in when you start to judge that internal critic can also be the same. Like you said something in a social anxiety video about like how if you just hang around somebody who's self-critical, then that's going to make you more critical.
Viral on that one.
Right.
I'm rolling in it.
I'm just going to repeat
video.
that one so I can get a viral post. So, a lot of people, that's my impersonation.
It's so weird how like you just have no idea what will resonate.
It's like slot machines with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we operate them differently. But the social anxiety thing, like if you are having a internal critic for yourself, but when you truly adopt that, some people, they have this low self-worth and it just looks like this judgment of self, but then it also turns around for some people and looks like this deep judgment of other people. And then they can be effective at something, they work hard, and then they can be so controlling, like, how could this idiot do this? And so I would say for a lot of people, if you're trying to work on your self-worth, look at what you judge the most in other people and ask yourself, what is worthy of judgment in that? Is it actually worthy of judgment, or am I overestimating how bad it is? Therefore, I also can't exist in the same way. Because once you ask that question of what do I judge in other people, that opens the door to even better question, which is how would I judge myself if I acted that way? I think both are good questions. There's not one better than the other, but that's a good way to practice healing. Like if you stop judging that person and yourself in that way, it's actually not judging a person, it's judging a symbol, as Carl Jung would talk about. It's like you're judging the symbol of something that sweeps you off your feet that you believe will also sweep somebody else off your feet.
100%. I totally agree with you. And I feel like obviously like someone who's seeking therapy with low self-worth probably is a lot more, as you would describe it, like self-critical. But there are also people who are just kind of assholes with low self-worth. And those people are always critical of others much more than they are critical of themselves. And so they're critical of others, and the ways in which so I think the question is like, someone with low self-worth who tends to be critical of others, why are they so critical of others? What is the underlying conditioning that's occurring under the surface that propels them and gravitates them towards judgment of others? And I think what's occurring is basically they're making this decision. They're like, okay, I feel like shit about myself. Unconsciously, they're not aware of it, but I feel like shit about myself. So how do I feel good then? Well, I don't really have the capacity to elevate myself, but I can drag you down. And so if I drag you below me, all of a sudden I'm above you and I feel better. The truth is, when you do that, it's like kind of a McDonald's form of feeling better, where it's an empty better, it's not a sustained better, because ultimately you're kind of manufacturing better. You're not feeling better in a vacuum. You need to make someone look crappy. It's like standing, it's like, I saw this on this movie. It's like this guy hired a short guy to stand next to him just so that when he's at movie premieres, he looks tall. It's a forced perspective.
I love your imagination. Yeah.
You're forcing the perspective of better by going like, well, at least I'm not Hitler. It's like, yeah, at least you're not Hitler. But if your metric of feeling good about yourself is not committing genocide, then you must be pretty shitty yourself.
Good standard. But I mean, that really speaks to this other thing, which is like, if whatever you successfully destroy in yourself to become what you want to become, that's what you hate and want to destroy in other people. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people who are bullied go on to bully other people. A lot
Hmm.
of people who are bullied or experience something very severe, trigger warning, like this is, I think, the reason for the cycle of abuse a lot. But you start to internalize the message that softness or whatever you're classifying it as is weak. And then once you classify it as weak, then you make a judgment of, I'm going to overcome this and be strong because those bullies were right. This is bad. I'm going to become something stronger than them. And so now that you've destroyed the symbol of weakness in your mind and you see somebody else that displays that same old weakness that you saw, because now you've trained your software to attack that, now you feel this rush of like, I want to make fun of that person. I want to make a joke. And a lot of people that do this aren't very self-aware, so they won't realize this is happening. So if you're self-aware and this is you, then that's really cool. Stop it. But you want to destroy that in other people. So it's hard for you to ever even realize it's a problem because it's something that you don't realize is actually happening internally. So to grow, you have to say, okay, I'm going to start not making fun of people that display this characteristic, and I'm going to start to love myself and realize that the part of me that was bullied as a kid actually was, there was nothing wrong with him. It was the people that were bullying me that were the problem here.
Hmm.
And the cycle of abuse is so bad because you see it a lot in movies and all that, like how somebody is abused, or you realize this person has been abusing somebody. Like the Menendez brothers was a good example. Like the
Yeah.
dad was so abusive.
Uh-huh.
And then, a movie we've seen together, a show.
I've never seen. I just know of it because it's a real life. It's like talking about Lincoln. You're like, oh, you saw the movie? Like, no,
Oh, you know Malcolm X.
I was in social studies, Jacob.
But there's this part, like the dad is so abusive. At least that's what the movie is showing. All that. I'm not going to give my whole opinion on that. Enough disclaimers, but
Yeah. No, I'm familiar.
and the dad at some point then said he's on the phone and they talk, and then he's talking about his abuse story with his mom, and then you just hear the invalidation that comes from his mom after he shares it. And so I think what happens is the same way you get abused, and then you see that weakness and suffering comes from not being stronger than destroying your predators or whatever. And then once you get big enough and strong enough, then you start to destroy whatever that is in other people. So one of the Menendez brothers also abused his brother after he was abused. And
Oh,
so
really?
I think that, yes. So
I
it's
didn't
like
know
it
that.
just shows that connection so clearly. And it was also interesting that the brother that did the abusing resembled most of the father. So it even shows, I don't know if it was just a good depiction of what actually happened, but psychologically it was sound. Like the boy who was most like his father and adopted the symbol of aggression as strong also found that he couldn't stop himself from abusing his little brother who took the opposite pathway, which was this softer nature, like people pleasing style.
And that usually shows the oftentimes children kind of split into one of two directions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, I feel like something that people don't understand about the way our psychology works is we learn most through modeling. Like I think it's kind of like assumes that a person learns most through someone going, hey, this is how you do this and this is how you do that, and you wipe after you're done doing this, right? But for the most part, the way we learn is through seeing others do things, and we're passively kind of taking notes. Keyword passively. So if you're witnessing an abusive person, an abusive parent, there's a part of your brain that inherently normalizes that behavior. And so even if you're not that bad, you're going to be a version of that because there's a part of you that just sees that as the norm. And that's why also I think sometimes, a lot of people who are fully aware, like, hey, I've got low self-worth and I'm working on it, still will be envious of others who have high self-worth, because deep down there's a part of them that doesn't feel like they deserve the thing that other people are modeling to them, which is, I mean, like at the core, you mentioned like, oh, you have to love yourself. It's like the path to loving yourself is the path to accepting yourself. But the problem with accepting yourself is you have to, I mean, usually what people say next is, yeah, if to fully accept myself in every way, means I might lose my family because of my sexuality. And it's like,
Mhm.
and it's like, and so I understand that there are decisions to be made that are difficult. But if you truly want to get to the end of this rainbow of accepting yourself, you must take it all the way. You can't be halfway accepting yourself, because then you will be halfway loving yourself.
Mhm. Wow. No, well said. That makes a lot of sense.
And what's scary for people is like, okay, I really want to love myself. I really want to have high self-worth. But the truth is, what I'm saying to you is not the same as you actually taking that path. Like, the uncertainty of every step towards self acceptance usually makes most people veer off the course. They're like,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to accept myself up until this level and now I'm done. Right? Because every step you take towards self acceptance is a step towards maybe rejection from people you care about. And
Mhm.
that's a very hard reality to come to grips with, I think.
I think so too. I mean, I think there's also the behavioral thing going back to that too when it comes to accepting and loving all parts of yourself, because you don't want to do it up to a certain point. But in Christian faith, that's a huge component too, which is confession, right? Like, you're not going to confession, and there's no rule book that says you have to confess in a way where you destroy yourself. But usually, when you hear the word confession, you think this admittance of wrong also comes with this feeling of deep shame.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, what's happening with confession is actually giving access to other parts of your life. There is the division, though, of course, where it comes to things that are considered holy versus unholy. And yet, underneath that umbrella, it's important to realize that if you don't give people in certain things, aspects of your life, then that's going to also make it difficult for you to experience love and acceptance. Because, like they talk about in attachment literature, it's like attachment healing happens in relationship with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you are
And yourself.
behaviorally and yourself, yeah, and if you're behaviorally hiding parts of yourself all the way back in the Garden of Eden, covering yourself in fig leaves, then that behavior is going to send a message to your psyche that there's something unworthy about me. And I
That's the
guess
receipts.
the receipts, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm convinced that, like, on this side of earth or whatever from heaven, we unfortunately have some things that need to be hidden unless you build more commitment and trust in relationships. And so that's why I would say the only two people that see you naked are your mom and your partner that you marry. And that's because that is a reflection of the emotional intimacy that's also happening. Like, if you I don't know, you're not gonna shower in front of your boss. You know, it's just this level of intimacy that can be different. But ideally, sometimes some of the most healing of wounds happen in community with people the closer you get to them and the more you show yourself.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And it's funny, like, I don't know if you were saying this, but like some things have to stay hidden to yourself
Mm-hmm.
until they're ready to be revealed. And I think sometimes, like for instance, if you're like escaping a narcissistic relationship, sometimes the recognition of the abuse only happens as you become more confident in your independence. If you start to feel like you can exist on your own 2 feet, magically, simultaneously, you start to see the cracks in the relationship. Not because, well, rather because you feel like you don't need it as much, and therefore you're allowing yourself to see more of the reality of what's happening. But
Yeah.
it's only when you feel that comfort and security that you allow yourself. And that's the thing, right? It's only when you accept yourself and your emotions and your experiences and your wholeness that you can start seeing reality for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're going to have to keep parts hidden in order to remain secure. And yeah, I mean, I guess, like, this isn't totally related. This is totally random, but I wanted to mention it last on the other episode, which is like, don't you feel like so? Don't you feel like oftentimes I feel like a narcissistic person tends to have anxiously attached kids. You ever notice that?
I don't know, but I mean, it makes sense to me.
Well, it keeps them. They're kind of like
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
constantly having this like never always like wanting they always feel this sense of responsibility towards maintaining the relationship and accommodating this person and accommodating the demands of this person. And I feel like it's rooted in this idea that, like, hey, you are not enough. And I'm going to trigger that feeling of not enough and trigger that feeling of low self-worth because it's what keeps you attached to me. So the second this person starts to, and this is what I've noticed, the second someone starts to work on their self-worth is the second they start to realize this relationship is abusive and I deserve better.
Yeah. Yeah. Because with anxious attachment, you have hyper vigilant theory of mind training because you're constantly looking at reality through the world of someone else to interpret things. And like you've said before, you have this excessive strength when it comes to your empathy because that's how you've had to survive. You've had to be able to navigate that yourself. And so if you have someone who's narcissistic that you're working with, like, yeah, you once you take a few steps away, like one, like the narcissist demands that they are seen as God in relationship. And
So what are you?
so yeah, that great point there too, right? Like, who am I to this? So your lower self-worth. And then when you see someone that way, if you see someone that has more self-worth than you and you feel like you have lower self-worth than them, how do you center your thoughts? Well, now each of your thoughts are going to go towards how do I satisfy them? And so if our brain can only handle 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of info, then I love saying
So
that.
funny.
So cool. And you're not going to have enough space in that working memory bank to actually figure out what's happening in here.
Mm-hmm.
So then how are you ever going to notice and actually act on ways to make it so that you put yourself first? If you don't even know what you need most of the time when you're with the person who is that you see as like having more self-worth. So I think that makes it really hard, but you can work towards growth by, asking yourself those questions before you're in that space or in therapy. I had something else, but that's it. It's like where your working memory is happening, that plays a big role in your ability to start making shifts and changes sometimes.
Well, you have to remember what this thing feels like. Like if you want to get out of any kind of addictive dynamic or relationship or whatever, you have to have a memory of actually that doesn't feel good, and I'm not enjoying that as much anymore. So why do I keep petting this dog that bites my hands? I don't know. And if you have this amnesia about the experience, you're gonna keep putting yourself in it. And also like, like I feel like a lot of times, this is a recommendation of the therapist, but also like if you are stuck in a narcissistic relationship, the number one thing I'm going to work on with you is not boundaries. It's not how do I navigate difficult conversations. It's what's going on with your self-worth. How do we improve your self-worth so you get to a point where this no longer is perceived as acceptable? Forget about trying to tell them off or explaining yourself in a way that gets through. No, why are you putting yourself in a position to harm yourself? It's because your self-worth is not at a place where it needs to be, and the second it is the second you'll go, screw this.
Yeah. So I'll say if people are talking about like they feel so stuck in this relationship with a narcissist or someone like that, I'll say our first step is not to get you. I'm not going to try to get you to settle for an experience that feels less than which is leaving the narcissist right now, even though we know logically it's better. I want you to want to leave. And that's the moment that we're going to be able to get you out of there. So that's going to keep them in the door with me in therapy. And then that's not as a way to like keep them stuck, but more so like to motivate them and give them buy-in to keep moving. And then that's going to slowly make them just like, I don't know why I was ever in that relationship in the first place.
They always say that afterwards, not during though.
Exactly. Once they get through it, it's a beautiful moment. I mean, I'm not going to reminisce in here because,
but
so I just go,
are
my thoughts just take me
Are
places.
we thinking of the same thing? No.
No.
Oh,
I'm
thinking
thinking about clients that I can't talk about.
Okay. I was like, oh, maybe there's some shared experiences we have that might apply.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that made me think of some stuff.
Shush.
Not client stuff, but yeah.
But like, I think this is such a tricky one because it's like the thing that keeps you stuck, which is you don't value yourself enough to do the work, is also the thing that will unstick you, which is you need to start doing the work in order to feel valuable. Like,
Mhm.
if okay, let me put it a different way, right? Like, imagine you have just like some little knickknack in your house, but for some reason it's super important to you. Like, for instance, I have this is sad and sweet, I guess, at the same time, but I have my dog Jack. I have his collar from when from 20 years ago at this point, but I still carry it with me, and it's very important to me. But at the same time, it's a dog collar, right? But I've added value to it, and I treat it like it's very valuable, and therefore it is valuable,
Mm.
right? So I've created value on this otherwise object that just exists.
Mm.
But you can also treat yourself in that same manner. You know, what would a valuable person do for themselves? Would they work extra late even when they don't need to, just to make the boss look at them positively? Or would they consider their own needs and have balance in their life? Would they drink themselves to death every night, even though it makes them feel like shit? Or would they treat their body like something that deserves to be treated well? Someone who treats their personhood as valuable is going to over time start to feel valuable themselves.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, that's why I'll tell some clients like people dealing with low self-worth or people that don't value themselves, I'll say, okay, let's do an exercise. Imagine that you are dealing with let's say that you are struggling with something or you're stuck in some type of really bad situation. I want you to imagine that you are 5 years old. Works really well if somebody has like a child that they take care of, like caretakers. And I'm like, I want you to imagine that that kid felt the way you feel right now. Like what comes up in you. And then oftentimes 80% of the time it's just deep tears because it's like, oh, I could never let them. And then they're like, wait, I'm so alone. I've been so lonely in this and I didn't even realize it. And so usually with treatment, what I'll do is I'll have the person who's dealing with, like, let's say this really insane like narcissistic relationship. They often at first feel so lonely because nobody gets it. They say, well, I love this person so deeply, and yet everybody that I talk to about it with my friends and my family, well, just get out. Like, a bad thing happens to me, so I'm leaving, and like, you're not doing that. What's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, so at the beginning of my work, I won't really invalidate anybody. I'll want to see, let's talk about how you got here so I can actually see you,
Yeah.
because you are so alone right now and nobody gets it, and I want to be at least one person that gets it with you. And then we'll start talking about how we can start shifting some things, and we'll do the self-care stuff and all that all through the process. But
Sure. I no, you're totally dead on. I really like that. The
yeah.
5-year-old thing. And it kind of illustrates something that I've noticed too, which is like someone who has on some level accepted mistreatment from a narcissistic person in their life quickly changes their tune when they have kids, because for some reason the second their kid starts to experience that mistreatment, all of a sudden this concept of self-worth enters into the picture, and they're like, you know what, it's one thing for me to accept this treatment, but I will never let this child accept what you're giving out there. And all of a
Oh
sudden
yeah.
they start standing up for themselves and start distancing themselves from abuse when they accepted it for so many years prior. So I
Mhm.
think children often are a catalyst towards people who otherwise had low self-worth to start thinking about their own self-worth and go, you know what, this is bullshit, and I'm not going to let it trickle down to anyone below me.
Oh yeah, that's why I love working with parents.
Right?
That
It's a lot
reference
easier.
point is just like, it's a gateway into a cognitive restructuring like no other.
Oh, let's end there.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Please subscribe to us. If you're listening 58 minutes and 56 seconds into this episode and you are not subscribed, for the love of God, just throw us a bone.
Oh yeah, yeah. We want you here, and we want you to leave a comment about what you want to watch next, because we're open to all topics. I like attachment. You're thinking
I
about,
like attachment too.
yeah. Vinny likes attachment too, and he likes
I'd like to be on the news.
self-esteem. Yeah. If you're watching this, who is the anchor that was supposed to, Bianca Peters? If you're watching this, then Vinny would also like to. I mean, he's actually from the East Coast, so
I promise I won't
it'd be more
cuss.
fitting. Yeah,
I probably will.
he'll be. No, never mind. Don't do it. Don't do it with him.
Anyway, we'll
Yeah.
see you. We'll see you next episode.
See you next episode. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you, Victor, for